Level 1. The Scribe's Son. Your fingers are already stained black by the time you learn to write your own name. You are 7 years old in your mother's tent at Karakoram, and the priest she has invited kneels beside you with a reed pen and a pot of ink brought in from Persia, Sorgagtani. Beki does not raise sons who cannot read. She is Nestorian by faith, Mongol by blood, and she has decided that all 4 of her boys will speak the languages of every people they will one day rule. You watch the priest's hand move across the parchment and ask him what the marks mean, and he tells you that ink is the only thing men make that outlives the men who made it. You do not understand this yet. You only know that it smells like iron and smoke, and that your mother is watching you with an expression you will spend the rest of your life trying to earn again. Your brothers are already being measured for their futures, Monke for judgment, Kublai for administration, and you for something no one has named yet. At night you trace letters into the dirt floor with your finger until they disappear. You do not know that one day you will be famous for what you burn, not what you write. You only know your hands already carry a stain that will not wash out. Level 2, the instrument. The seal is cold against your palm before anyone explains what it means. You are 31 years old, standing before your brother Monke in the felt halls of Karakoram in the year 1253, and he places into your hand the authority to lead an army west toward the lands your grandfather, Genghis Khan, never lived to conquer. The empire's law is simple and absolute. The whole earth is owed to the Mongol nation, and any city that refuses to submit forfeits its right to exist. Monke gives you nearly 150,000 men, siege engineers drawn from Chinese garrisons who can build machines that throw fire over walls 300 paces away, and instructions that leave no room for mercy toward anyone who resists. You feel the weight of the seal more than the weight of the army. This is how the empire actually works beneath its terror, not through numbers alone, but through a relay system of riders and way stations called the Yam, stretching for thousands of miles. So, a command issued in Karakoram can reach a general in Persia within weeks instead of seasons. You are not being sent to explore a frontier. You are being sent to finish something your grandfather started and never lived to see completed. You ride west knowing exactly what is expected of you. You do not yet know what it will cost you to become the man who delivers it. Level 3. The Breaker. The mountain air at 8,000 feet is thin enough that your soldier's breath comes in ragged clouds before the fighting even starts. It is 1256, and you stand below the fortress of Alamut, held by the Nizari Ismailis for over 160 years, the mountain sanctuary from which their leaders are said to have trained assassins who killed sultans in crowded rooms and vanished before the blood cooled. Rukn al-Din Khorshah surrenders the castle without the siege you prepared for. Inside, your men find a library. Scholars spent generations building in secret, manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, and philosophy found nowhere else on Earth. You give the order to burn most of it. Among the men sorting through the wreckage is an astronomer named Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, held prisoner by the Ismailis for years before your arrival, and something in the way he speaks about the stars makes you spare him instead of the books. You do not know yet what that single decision will become. You have just destroyed one of the greatest private libraries on Earth to eliminate a threat already crumbling from within. And the only thing you chose to save was a man who watched you do it, Level 4, the Judge. The heat off the Mesopotamian plain presses down on you like a hand before Baghdad is even visible on the horizon. It is 1257, and you have sent word ahead to the Caliph al-Mustasim, the 37th ruler of an Abbasid line that has held religious authority over the Islamic world for over 500 years, offering him the same choice your grandfather offered every city before this one: submit and live as a vassal, refuse and be destroyed completely. His vizier, Ibn al-Alqami, urges him to submit. The caliph refuses, certain that no army has ever taken the seat of the caliphate, certain that Baghdad's walls and the sanctity of his title will protect a city of nearly 1 million people the way they always have. This is how conquest actually functions beneath the surface of your empire. Submission early spares a city entirely. Refusal invites a destruction so total that word of it keeps the next city from making the same mistake. You have watched this pattern hold across a dozen cities already. You give the order to encircle Baghdad completely, cutting every road in and out, and you wait for an answer you already know is coming. The caliph believes his God will not allow the unthinkable. You have learned that belief has never once stopped a siege engine. Level 5, the Undoer. The smoke reaches your camp before the smell of the river does, and when you finally ride into the city on the 10th of February in 1258, the water of the Tigris has turned black. Your soldiers have emptied the House of Wisdom, a library and translation center built nearly 500 years earlier, one of the great repositories of human knowledge on the planet, and thrown its manuscripts into the river by the cartload, survivors will say for generations that the water ran black with ink for days and red with blood for longer. The death toll is impossible to know exactly, but estimates from the chroniclers who lived through it run into the hundreds of thousands. You give the order that the caliph must die without his royal blood touching the ground. So your soldiers wrap him in a carpet and have him trampled by horses inside his own palace. Ibn al-Alqami, the vizier who urged surrender, survives to serve you instead. 508 years of Abbasid rule end in a matter of days. You stand in a city that was once the largest and most learned on earth, and you feel nothing you expected to feel. You wanted to end a threat. You have ended a civilization's memory of itself instead, and no part of you knows yet whether that was the same thing. Level 6, the ruler, the night air on the hill above Marahe, is cold enough to sting your face while the astronomers align their instruments. It is 1259, and you have founded a kingdom of your own now, the Ilkhanate, stretching from the Oxus River to the Mediterranean coast, with your capital at Tabriz, the man you spared at Alamut. 3 years ago, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi now commands the observatory you ordered built, a complex housing a library that will hold more than 400,000 volumes and instruments precise enough to calculate the length of a year within seconds of its true value. Your wife Dokes Khatun, a devout Nestorian Christian, sits beside you at court, and you have granted protection to churches and monasteries across territory, ruled over millions of Muslim subjects who have not forgotten what happened at Baghdad. This is the irony no one names aloud in your presence. The same hands that ordered the greatest library in the Islamic world thrown into a river are now paying to build one of the most advanced centers of astronomy the world has ever seen. You tell yourself this is what a ruler does, that destruction and creation have always traveled together. You do not ask yourself which one people will remember first. Level 7, the defeated. The messenger's hands are shaking before he even says your general's name. It is 1260, and you are back in Persia, not in the Levant, because your brother Monki has died in China, and Mongol law requires every Khan's sons to return for the succession that follows. You have pulled most of your army east with you, leaving your friend and General Kitbuka, a Nestorian Christian like your wife, with only a few thousand men to hold the newly taken Syrian territory at a place called Ain Jalut. The Mamluk army of Egypt under Baybars and Sultan Qutuz meets Kitbuka in battle and destroys him completely. It is the first major defeat a Mongol army has suffered in 6 decades of continuous expansion. Kitbuka is captured and executed on the field. You learn the news the way you have delivered it to 100 other rulers, second-hand, absolute, and impossible to undo. This is how the Empire's myth of invincibility actually worked beneath every victory before this one. Cities surrendered not because Mongol soldiers were unbeatable, but because everyone believed they were. And belief was a weapon your grandfather never had to draw. That weapon is broken now, and no victory you win after this will ever fully repair it. Level 8, the widower. Your hands are cold even under the blankets by the winter of 1265, and no fire in Maragay seems to reach the chill anymore. Your wife Dokes Khatun has died only months before you, and with her goes the last person who remembers who you were before Baghdad, before Alamut, before any of it. Your cousin Burqa Khan, ruler of the Golden Horde to the north, converted to Islam years ago and has never forgiven you for the caliph's death. And now, Mongol fights Mongol along the Caucasus for the first time in the empire's history. Cousin against cousin, grandsons of the same man, tearing at territory their grandfather conquered together. You are 52 years old, and the empire you helped build now has enemies wearing the same face you see when you look at your own sons. This is the cost no one calculated when your grandfather divided the earth among his descendants. That an empire built entirely on shared blood has no mechanism left for peace once that blood turns against itself. You have outlived the woman who protected churches beside you, the brother who gave you your command, and the myth that made your soldiers unbeatable. You are the last one standing in a room that used to be full, and you are no longer certain what you are standing guard over. Level 9, the name left behind. Your fingers are stained again in your final winter, but this time the ink belongs to the astronomers, not to the priest who taught you letters 45 years ago in your mother's tent. You die in 1265 at Maragay, the same year as your wife, and you are buried according to Mongol custom on an island in Lake Urmia. A final brutality attached to your name, even in death. Nasir al-Din al-Tusi finishes the star tables you funded, tables so accurate that astronomers in Europe are still using them 2 centuries later, without knowing whose hands paid for them. The House of Wisdom you emptied into the Tigris is gone completely. its knowledge scattered into a river that has long since run clear again. The observatory you built still stands in ruins on a hill outside Maragay, and its star charts survived in copies long after its walls fell. The ink that once turned a river black is the same ink that once recorded the exact motion of the planets. You never got to be remembered as the boy who loved letters. The ink never washed out. It just changed what it was used for.